So today's talk is going to be on South Asian women politicians' COVID-19 response. And we'll have Akhil Neelam Sugandha Parmar, who are from India. And we have Dr. Sonam Chukki joining in from Bhutan, and Prakriti Bhattarai, who is joining us from Nepal. So I think one of the reasons why we got multiple speakers this time is we wanted to get a comprehensive and cohesive understanding of how different South Asian countries are handling this crisis, because it is impacting in a different way. But a lot of us are very similar in our geography, our economy, as well as the culture. So just that's why we have multiple speakers this time. And just to give you a brief about us, we started with the idea of having a constructive dialogue platform for people to come and talk on various issues related to international relations, security, IR, as we say, and as well as the wider social sciences aspects. So politics, democracy, all those issues, because I think it's very important to have these kind of discussions and debates. And technology helps us to use this, leverage this tool without borders, without actually having to physically be present and still have a discussion. So, as most of you know, the inspiration for this has been uh, not just the fireside chats of what the U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt held during the World War II and Great Depression, but also just getting people together in times of crisis and having these kind of discussions so that our society benefits from it. So again, these are informal way to connect. A lot of you have reached out to us to present, and this is the result of one of those outreach to us. So yeah, we do take into consideration people who reach out to us and say they'd like to present. So yeah, and we've had people suggest speakers. You can definitely suggest speakers that you want to hear, and we'll be happy to see how we can accommodate them. So again, our guiding principles: be an open forum for constructive dialogue and knowledge sharing. We especially encourage young professionals, early career professionals to come speak with us, participate, learn from each other, and again, a place for collaboration and brainstorm. In the past, we've had people finding collaborations through this platform, and I think going forward, we'd like to continue doing this. So execution of our idea, obviously the fireside chats we hold on a weekly basis are the cornerstone of it. We also have a YouTube channel now, so do look out for Asian Pathfinders on YouTube, and you'll see all our past sessions till the last week's one, and this one's also going to be online by early next week, depending on the internet speed that we have. So yeah, these are just the potential topics. These are just the guiding ones. Happy to discuss any other topics that you think you'd like to present or like to be discussed. So our email ID is firesidechats.asia@gmail.com. I'll definitely leave it in the chat, but yeah, uh, these are just guidelines. I think we all are mature individuals, but just for us to understand how, because we're coming from very different cultures and backgrounds, respect the views of others, refrain from making very strong, abusive statements. If you do, you'll definitely be removed from here, because we don't want any kind of bullying here. We want people to feel safe in this environment. Uh, and respect intellectual property, because this whole platform is about ideas and knowledge, and that's your IP. So respect your and others' IP. And if you want to use the content, please reach out to the speakers. If you don't know how to get in touch with us, we'll be happy to put you in touch with the speakers if you want to use any of their information or material. So contacts, these are me and Shreyas. So about today's talk, I think all of us have heard that during this entire crisis of COVID-19, how female politicians, be it Angela Merkel or Jacinda Ardern or others, have responded to this crisis. But a lot is not talked about how South Asian women politicians have handled this crisis, because crisis management is about leadership, and leadership is gender neutral. It doesn't have to be a man or a woman leader. So, but it's more important in today's times that women are seen as leaders and not just, in Akhil and Sugandha's words, not just as victims, but as someone who are leading from the front. So yeah, that's very important. So today we have Sugandha and Akhil. They work for the Andhra Pradesh government school education department. And Sugandha is a fellow SOASIN, so School of Oriental and African Studies, London. She did her master's there, and she's also done another master's from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Uh, Akhil has studied from Ashoka, excuse me, attended Ashoka University, and he is passionate about public policy, governance, and to contribute in a responsible politics. So both of them have started Women for Politics. Do check out their YouTube channel. Sorry, not YouTube, sorry, LinkedIn page and their website, Women for Politics. And you can definitely find a lot more information about how different women are leading in this time and other times also. We have Dr. Sonam Chukwu, who is joining us from Bhutan. She is currently the curriculum developer for history and civic education with the Royal Education Council in Paro. She holds a PhD in gender and politics from Queensland University of Technology, Australia, and a master's in development and international relations from Aalborg University, Denmark. And she's also studied her BA, Bachelor's in English Literature honors from National Institute of Education in Bhutan. She's taught gender and development studies, and she's really passionate about the whole topic of gender studies, but also women in politics. So I'm sure I'll let her take over when she comes. And Prakriti, trust me, she leads from the front. So we had this discussion yesterday, and she said, maybe I'll be there, but maybe I'll not be. I'm glad she did, because she is an activist who is always actually an activist. She's on the street. She's like, I might be detained or possibly if I, because she believes in raising the voice for political empowerment of young people, and she leads from the front, trust me. She's currently the chairman for Political Literacy for Women and advocates the meaningful participation of women in political sphere. I'll let her speak more about her work. And she studied leadership, action, and organizing, leading change at Harvard Kennedy School. She hosts a social commentary channel named Uncovered, through which she dissects the socio-political issues and informs young audience. And she is the council member of the US Embassy Youth Council Nepal and an Erasmus alumni. So that's it from me. I'll give it to the first two of our presenters, Akhil and Sugandha. So over to you guys.
Thanks, Pallavi. I'm just sharing the screen. I'm opening the PPT.
Yeah, Akhil, we can't hear you. So if you could unmute.
Can you hear me? Is it audible?
Still can't.
Okay, Prakriti can hear me.
Yeah, I can now. Sorry, I just had some technical. Yeah.
Okay, you all can hear me now. Pallavi.
The host has disabled share screen, so you'll have to enable us.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can. Just 1 second, guys. Anyone who's not muted, I do see some of you are not. Please mute yourselves. I will do that too, but just at your end, if you can mute yourselves. Thank you. Please start.
Pallavi, am I muted? Otherwise, please mute.
No, Sonam, I think you're not. If you don't mind, I'll just try.
Please mute for me. I couldn't figure it out.
I'll do that. Thank you. Akhil, you can start. Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Pallavi, for the introduction and this opportunity. I would like to start with this slide where I want some of you to unmute yourselves and give me your thoughts on what you see there. These are all headlines from national and international media. You must be familiar with these faces by now if you've been reading news about COVID pandemic and how leadership is responding to it. Any thoughts on this slide?
Yeah, most of these seems to be a success story for that matter. Germany is holding very well. New Zealand is holding very well. So, and Taiwan as well.
Yes.
So,
Yes, thanks, Shreyas. Of course, I mean, the COVID pandemic has brought out the discussion on effectiveness of political leadership in responding to crisis situation. And there are lots and lots of media reports out there where women leaders' work is highlighted across the globe, be it New Zealand or Germany or Taiwan, Denmark, Finland, all all these countries led by women prime ministers and presidents have been successfully responding to the COVID pandemic. And this intrigued us more into digging deeper on how women politicians in South Asian countries are responding to the pandemic. And here comes a snapshot of more headlines from the recent past discussing about South Asian story of responding to COVID. Afghanistan is dealing with the pandemic amidst peace talks with Taliban's. Bangladesh is also dealing with a large influx of Rohingya refugees. There is a news headline which says a 37-year-old woman sarpanch who leads an all-woman team to fight COVID. Similar with Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and all these South Asian countries, which are also fighting the challenges of developing nations alongside the COVID pandemic. And we wanted to look at how women politicians in these South Asian countries, because all these countries, 8 countries of South Asia region, are developing nations and also densely populated. They are with their own challenges and simultaneously have had to deal with this large COVID pandemic as well. Here is a quick snapshot on how many women parliamentarians are there in South Asia. About 19% women are there in South Asian parliaments. The highest standing in Nepal with 33%. My co-speaker Prakriti will obviously talk about that more in detail. The least being in Maldives with just 4.6%. So these are all numbers from respective lower houses or the only houses in these countries. So we worked on curating stories of those women from these South Asian countries who've been dealing with the COVID pandemic. I would like to take this opportunity to quickly highlight some of their work from across this region. Starting with Nepal, Prakriti, the co-speaker here, she helped us with this story. This is a Mayor Kantika from one of the remotest parts of Nepal. Among many other preparedness measures and healthcare measures, she produced a lot of online videos, TV and radio shows in order to enhance mental health for the city residents. Uh, then coming to Sultana Nadira, who is a member of parliament in Barisal in Bangladesh, the COVID pandemic has hit Bangladesh so much that the government is unable to find funds in order to provide medical supplies and other PPE that's required there. So she has been helping local hospitals with her own funds. She is largely available to public. She has made her contact public so that anybody and everybody in her constituency can reach out if there is need. Then Shailaja teacher from India is a well-known figure. I think should be familiar by now to all, at least to Indians out here. She from setting up COVID command center to leading the local governments in responding to the COVID pandemic. She has also dealt with Nipah virus pandemic just before the COVID in 2 years ago. She's recently even honored by the UN to share the experiences of how Kerala has successfully flattened the curve and lessons for the for the rest of the country and for the globe. Bhutan's health minister, Deshan Wangmo, she says an interesting thing, which she says, I am up all night reading all available reports on COVID pandemic to know more about its nature and tweak Bhutan's response to COVID. She is hell bent on science and evidence driving this pandemic response in Bhutan. I'm sure Dr. Sonam will talk more about it in detail. Fauzia Kufi, one of the members of parliament in Afghanistan, she is not just responding to the COVID pandemic in her constituency. Alongside, she's also a member of Human Rights Commission and also at the in the front lines with Taliban's negotiating peace deals for the country. There is a member of provincial assembly from Punjab in Pakistan, despite of being a 65-year-old. Um, uh, uh, she is constantly out there on the ground in the front lines, doing door-to-door campaigns, distributing rations to the poor, visiting quarantine centers. Unfortunately, she contacted with the virus and she passed away on May 20th. She's from Pakistan. Um, Sri Lanka is also led by a woman health minister, Ms. Pavitra. She is constantly seen in the media briefing her citizens on creating awareness, and also constantly engaging with multilateral organizations such as WHO, other countries, including India, China, Australia, to seek aid and facilitate quick response for Sri Lanka. In fact, Sri Lanka opened up early last month and they did not see much spike in the cases thereafter. That's one of the success stories from Sri Lanka where she, as a health minister, is leading. I would let my colleague Sugandha speak about lessons they gave us while we tracked many women politicians within India as well. I will let her speak on the lessons they gave us while fighting this pandemic.
Okay. Thank you, Akhil. Thank you, Asia Pathfinders. Thank you, Pallavi, for a great introduction. And I wish a lot of success to Asia Pathfinders. I think we could only do this South Asian edition of our Beyond Victims with that collaboration, with getting help from Dr. Sonam, Prakriti, and even a lot of other friends across South Asian nations. So while we did these stories, there were around 28 stories of women across South Asian nations. Almost 18 of them, not 18, but yeah, around 17 or 18 of them being women at the local level, sarpanch. And while looking at these stories, there were some overarching lessons that we thought are very important for women's leadership. And given the context of South Asia as well. So a larger thing that we saw was that the earlier leadership, which was more of a directive leadership, we see among these women a change in that earlier form of leadership. This new leadership is more participative, communicative, inclusive, and collaborative. And I'll just brief a bit more into this. In case, I'll also request Pallavi, in case I exceed my time limit, please keep a check because we have other speakers and I really want to listen to other speakers as well. So if I at all go out of time, please let me know. So starting off, the very first thing was that all these women had plans in place. So they were really informed about what's happening around. Some of them had anticipated risks. For example, we had someone from a sarpanch who understood and anticipated that there might be increase in domestic violence, there might be an increase in alcohol consumption, and quickly took up steps to close the alcohol shops. Similarly, we had an interesting ward councillor from West Bengal. And West Bengal at this time, out of all the other states, was worse hit because it was not just COVID. In the midst of COVID, there was Amphan and there were heavy rains. And they had to deal with that as well. And this ward councillor actually, so she comes from a minority ward. There's the month of Ramadan as well, and people were fasting. So this ward councillor had ensured that there are doctors in place already every day available to the community. There are testing vans that are available. There were also for the people who are fasting, because the evening meal is really important. They made sure they had a local park, and they made sure that the social distancing was maintained. They got all the vendors and hawkers to settle and establish that vegetable market with all the norms. They also, so while there was the floods that were coming, when we were speaking to her, she actually, we asked her, did Amphan add to the whole issue? And she said that, you know what, we already got and procured pumps so that we can pump out the water. We already ensured that she had a team of volunteers who could clear up the wreckage as well. So these kind of things, apart from the early lockdown, which we have talked about, of almost all the women we saw, who had been following not just social distancing, but have done early lockdown in their own constituencies and villages, they really had these plans in place. And I think looking at that, it's probably because of the limited resources that these leaders have to deal with, where they had to ensure that there's no wastage, and there's that issue of just going haphazard. It's something that they can't afford. We move to this other quality, which is technology-driven response. I think there's a lot of discussion that has happened around women and technology, digital gender divide. What we have seen here is that so almost all sarpanches, and I'm talking about women at the lowest and the localist rather level, they were all equipped with WhatsApp. They were all equipped with Facebook, internet. They were keeping themselves very much informed through technology. They were using the technology to communicate with all the villages, and not just the villages, but also to the other counterparts in the other villages, and get the best practices that were being practiced around. They were also looking at research. We have seen a continuous updation of what's happening, looking at the research which was happening. So we had another interesting sarpanch from Palej, Nasima Banu, who approached the police to use drones to look at the surveillance and ensure the lockdown was done. We had someone who was a sarpanch from Rohisa, Gujarat, who ensured that the payments and cash transfers were made to the poor women and the Manrega workers through an app, a government app, which is DigiPay, to transfer cash, so that women did not have to walk to town centers to go to ATM.
Sugandha, 2 minutes, please. Yeah,
sure.
Fine.
So and then we have so we have effective communication. So we already talked about technology, and there's, apart from using technology, there was another thing that these women were doing, was to ensure that this communication is inclusive. Sorry, hold on. So your pictures are hiding the content. I have to read. Sorry. So the communication was really inclusive. They reached out to people who did not have access to phones or internet. The Health Minister of Kerala even used her resources, set up a team to continuously combat fake news. Almost all these women, through their fast communication, through their inclusive communication, have also maintained that transparency in what they have been doing, what has happened. And this is not something, honestly, this is not even something that we analyze. It was so upfront. This was so something which we could see everywhere on their WhatsApp, Facebook. You can just see what's happening on a daily basis. They have been updating their constituents. The last part is about the inclusiveness and the resourcefulness. So I think coming from a nation or a village which is resource constrained, this is something which has probably come naturally, but also to mobilize people, mobilize youth, mobilize women, and getting all the women to use. So Akhil in the beginning talked about a Roorkee Sarpanch. So that Sarpanch had actually been mobilizing women to deliver food door to door. And similarly, we had seen the Pakistani MPA who had taken steps to ensure that there was door-to-door delivery of food. So they have been been inclusive in communication, been inclusive in providing resources. We have there's a picture of MLA Danasurya from Telangana, who ensured that she herself even walked to different terrains, reached out to tribal regions to ensure that they get the essential supply, made sure that she utilized the community resources so that this is equally distributed among the communities. There is this MP from Fauzia Kofi from Afghanistan, who had also been raising money to pull in resources and ensure food and essential supplies to Afghani people. So women have been really working with not just women, but also poor and other minorities, such as tribes. And then there's, of course, collaboration and community, which I've covered almost across, and this is something that moves across all the women politicians we have looked at, that not just working with the community, but also actively collaborating with the local authorities, looking at army. So, Akhil also in the beginning talked about the mayor from Nepal, who actually had, brought together army, navy, and sat together to come up with best practices and to find solutions. So that collaborativeness, partnering with community to deliver the essentials, is something that is very much seen. Almost all sarpanches that we looked at had some way or the other mobilized the youth to spread awareness. Some of the women were even stitching masks. So that's something about it. So we see women who are technology driven. We see women, and these are probably something which is a mixed factor of coming from developing nations, from the South Asia, and also a clear sense of empathy towards minority, which brings in that inclusion, and addressing the solutions. So that's where I'll end. I hope I've stuck to the time limit. And thank you. Sorry if I've spoken too fast to keep up with time. If you want to read about all the stories, you can look at www.womenforpolitics.com/blog. We have our Beyond Victim series. We have more things coming up, so keep yourself updated. You can also look us up on LinkedIn. I will let Ms. Prakriti talk more about Nepal and what's happening around what's women's political participation. Thank you very much.
Okay, so next is Prakriti, and she is from Nepal, and I'll let her take over. Prakriti, you can share your presentation, and request you to keep it about 10 to 12 minutes, and then I'll hand it over after you to Dr. Sonam. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Just a moment. Okay, hello everybody. Namaste. My name is Prakriti Bhattarai Basnet and I am from Nepal. I run this small initiative called Political Literacy for Women. It's a grassroots initiative that we have just started. We are not even 6 months old, so I don't know if I'm expert to talk about the things that I'm about to talk about, but this is nothing but just a rant about, we just saw that we have 33% representation in our parliament, but how is it actually, and how data lie? So that is what we are going to talk about. The presentation, I've titled this presentation as Why I Get Pissed When They Say We Have a Female President, Reasons on Why I'm Angry. So this is the name of my presentation. Before getting into the part about why I get pissed, I will talk to you guys about the achievements that we have had so far. So the achievements that we have as a country in terms of women parliamentarians, women representation in politics, women in politics as a whole, few achievements that we have had. First, we have a female president. We have a female speaker of the parliament. We have former Chief Justice. She was also a female, highly controversial figure, but she was still female, and she was the former Chief Justice. Similarly, we have 33% reservation in parliament. Right now, also, we have 33% women, nearly 33% women in our parliament. Similarly, our constitution is also guaranteed that we will have 33% women in all our state mechanisms and all political party structures. But we have been able to achieve 33% in our parliament, but we have not yet achieved 33% representation in state mechanisms and political parties. We also are the youngest federal democracy in the world. So we just had our federalism after a long war and civil war, lot of political chaos. After that, we just got our federal democracy. And in our local elections, which we had probably 2.5 years back, we have 40.9% women in local government. So that is something to celebrate about. And I'm so happy and so proud to tell you guys that these are the achievements that we have had so far. In terms of society as a whole, we are a very progressive society in accepting new ideas and accepting new things, but also we are reluctant in stabilizing as well as institutionalizing those ideas. So we have welcomed new ideas, but we are struggling to stabilize those things, fighting against all the odds. So these are the achievements that we have had so far, and I'm so happy and proud to say that we are one of the leading countries in South Asia to represent women in politics. Moving on, so it sounds amazing, right? But I'll give you reasons that these things are not true, and these things are not how things are working here. It's just numbers, and women in politics, it's still a far-fetched dream, and we have not been able to get it. So yes, so the key to success, how we got 30% was only because of two reasons. The first reason was the feminist movement that ran in 90s was so strong, and the parliamentarians then were so strong that they were able to bring this Article 3514 in interim constitution of Nepal, which ensured proportional representation. So according to proportional representation, what happens is if any political party wants to go into election, so before, what they have to do is they have to submit a list of candidates before election. And those candidates, amongst those candidates, they should have 50% women. So until and unless they will present that list of 50% women, candidates with 50% women, till then the election commission won't allow those political parties to go into election. So that is the sole reason why we have 30%. It's not that we are inclusive society. It's not that, the idea of equality is something that is emerging. It's because the election commission is so strong here, and during the election process, political parties have to have 50%. Unless they can't go into elections. So that is the reason that our political parties have started to put in candidates. But all these women candidates that are winning are from proportional representation. Most of them, they don't get political parties tickets, the tickets that we get. The political parties are not giving us tickets, they are only giving the proportional representation seats. So as you can see, the first past the post, I don't know how it is functioning in other countries, but in our country what happens is there are two ways to get into parliament. One is FPTP and the other is PR, proportional representation. Through FPTP, political parties will give tickets to people, and on the basis of that, they will have to go into direct elections and win, in which the political parties are not giving women representatives tickets to run for elections. And from PR, actually proportional representation is for everybody. It's not only for women, but in Nepal, the concept is that PR equals to women. So political parties are giving PR seats to women and FPTP to men. So That is why women do not have much power in parliament. They are perceived in a different way. Even though there is 33%, glamorized 33%, they are not so powerful and they are looked down upon, even though they go through whole this political chaos, and even though they win. There are few women only who have gone through FPTP and won the elections, but most of them, they don't even run because they don't get parties tickets. And there are other different aspects, social reasons, economical reasons, there are other reasons, but the most important one is they are not getting tickets. Okay, so moving on. So our parties are not committed to the principle of inclusion. As you can see in figures, in numbers, we have 40.9% in local government, we have 33% in parliament. So that is something exemplary. But our society, our political parties, they are not committed to the principle of inclusion. They are only doing it because there are some legal and constitutional constraints that needs to be fulfilled in order to render that power from the country. So for power, they are doing it, not for equality. So that is our fight. When I started, I'm just 21 years old, but I used to get pissed when I look at these facts and numbers. So when I started political literacy for women, people used to question me, you already have 30% women in the parliament, you already have female president, why are you doing it? You guys are just, the so-called feminists, why are you doing it? You are ruining the, social, what do you say, the peace that we have. You are bringing new gender perspectives, and we had a lot of things to fight over. And I always used to get pissed when people say that you have a female president. So I'll give you multiple reasons on why I'm actually pissed. So some disturbing patterns regarding 30% that there actually is. So first disturbing pattern is, so our country's ruling party now is Nepal Communist Party, NPC. Nepal Communist Party is the largest party of this country. And if you go through Nepal's history, you can see that there was 10 years Maoist revolution. So that political party that was in Maoist revolution is in government now, right? So at that time, there was a huge, war, civil war going on in Nepal. And in that war, the 1/3 of the women were there. I mean, they were with their babies, with their guns, fighting for 10 years. And now that political party is in power, but still there are 0 women in the secretariat of that political party. So it makes no sense. There is no women representation in that political party where all decisions are made. So 10 years of Maoist revolution that we were part of, it makes no sense right now because there is no representation of us. So 0 out of 9. And in standing committee of political party, there are 3 women out of 45. And these 3 women are also there because their husbands, most of their husbands passed away. So they are just keeping, the position. So it's like, you're given something not because there is this concept of inclusion, but it's something that you have to do for the picture, so that when they sit, there will at least be 3 women sitting in the stage. So that is what is happening. So this is the opposition party that we have, that's the Nepal Congress Party. And even in that party, there is only 1 woman who is the office bearer of that party, and she is also the treasurer. So she does not have, much power in decision making. So you guys can see that, even though we have 30%, when it comes to power, women are not in powerful positions and not in leadership positions. And you can see that both the opposition as well as the party which is in power, the Communist Party, who is supposed to be for the feminist movement, is still not being able to, get women. And it's not even that women are not there and they are not well equipped to be in that position. We have pretty good, educated and capable women who should be in that Communist Party's regime, which they are not a part of. So, and it really pisses me off. So as you can see that political parties have given 30% to parliamentary seats to women because of pressure from the election commission, not because of, as I said earlier, not because of the inclusion. So what we can see here is, as a society, we are not as inclusive as we are in numbers, and there is difference in parliament and political parties. As I said you earlier, that in parliament that there is 33%, but in political parties there are only 1 to 2 women who are in actual party structure. That is happening because there is compulsion given by the election committee when in terms of parliament, but there is no compulsion when it comes to political parties. There is no proper monitoring body which monitors whether there are women in party structures or not. So these are the major reasons that we don't have a proper monitoring mechanism. That is why, even though our constitution guarantees such beautiful things, we are not being able to get it. So it's because we don't have a proper place. So another shocking fact is that this constitution that I'm talking about and giving this love introduction about. It's after that constitution was introduced, there are already 10 cabinets formed, but 10 cabinets, the ministers, there are 10 prime ministers, but even in that cabinet, there is nothing close to 30%. There are only 1 to 2 women or something like that. So none of these cabinets have 30%, because our constitution has said that in all party structures, everywhere, in every level, there will be 30%, but none of them have guaranteed. So even prime minister of our country is unconstitutional. Even the political parties of our countries are unconstitutional if we go on the basis of the constitution that we have. But the feminist movement, the movement that we are running, is not so strong enough that we have not been able to establish this narrative internationally, saying that even our political parties are unconstitutional. So political literacy for women, we work for it, so that we are trying to build this narrative that even our prime minister, even all our political parties are unconstitutional. Until and unless you will have 30% in your political party structures, then only I can consider you as a political party. So that is the narrative that we are trying to establish. You can see that in Nepal there is a big chaos, and as I was talking to the organizers yesterday, I was about to get caught for the second cause that I have put here forward. This citizenship bill is coming, and we are having this whole chaos about citizenship bill. It's even now it is difficult in Nepal to get citizenship in the name of the mother, so we are fighting on that, and that is the reason that this whole political chaos is going right now. One of the reasons the political chaos is going right now, but it's nothing closer to what 30% looks like internationally, and the numbers that actually is shown when it comes to the topic of Nepal. Another disturbing pattern, as you can see, is also that all the political appointments, the public offices where political appointments happens, for example, Nepal Television, Radio Nepal, Rashtriya Samachar Samiti. So these are the organizations that are owned by the government and also the public, but there are political appointments happening. Till now, there are none women who are appointed by any political party for these public offices. So as you can see, it's only because of the constitution that's coming up. When it comes to political parties, they don't do shit about sorry for my French, but I get angry when I see like this, because we have already introduced this concept of inclusion and introduced this concept of 30% a long time back, but till now none of the public offices, the political appointment of women has happened before. And till now, you can see that just a month back, we had this ambassadorial recommendation coming up, and there was only one woman who was recommended as ambassador, and that too, she was so bashed by public that she didn't get the position. So as you can see that, the data that is shown and what actually happened is totally different. And in terms of the local representation, and I'll connect this with the COVID-19 response. So what is happening here is, as I told earlier, that in federal elections, the local elections, what we had 40.9% representation in local government. So this was something that we celebrated, and was, in international level also, it was something that was really praised, and it was beautiful to see so many young, diverse women in local government. But these 40.9% women were the deputies. They were never the chairperson. They were never the mayors. They were all in deputy position. As a result, they don't have power, because all the power is made in such a structure that the power is owned by the mayor. The power is owned by the chairperson. The deputy person is just there to, for the functionality. So even though when we say 40.9%, 91% of those 40.9 are in deputy position. So it makes no sense, because they don't have any power. It's just for the photo picture, as I say always, that when women are there, it makes photo look colorful. So that is only the reason that they are there, and they are all in deputy position. Most of them, 9% are only in the chairperson level or
Sorry,
near
about
level.
a minute, please, and wrap up. We have to.
Yes, okay. So quickly, I'll move on to what is happening with the COVID-19 response in Nepal. In terms of COVID-19 response in Nepal, we could see that in local level, empathetic leadership and collaborative leadership worldwide is increasing. And we can see the countries where there is women leadership are doing great, because inherently women have this feeling of empathy and collaborativeness, because most of the times throughout the history we have been sitting in home, we coexisted in a society, because empathy and collaboration is something that is ingrained within us. So that is what is coming up, because in times of crisis, It is empathy and it is collaboration that needs to display and that needs to come into practice when it comes to leadership. So as you can see, powerful men are not being able to control pandemic because empathy and collaboration is lacking. Where there is empathy and collaboration, COVID-19 is handled properly, as you can see. And even in Nepal, we can see this pattern. But the high-level committee that is formed by the Prime Minister for the COVID response, there is not a single woman in that high-level committee that our government has formed to deal with COVID-19. So as you can see that the COVID-19 response, we are going uphill in the track of COVID. So now the situation is worsening, and there is none women in that high-level committee that is formed by Prime Minister in response to COVID-19. So we are getting really active, for talking against the government. If you have seen in Nepal, there is a big chaos going on against Prime Minister because of the steps like this. Imagine the high-level committee which plans the COVID response for whole country, small country, but a lot of people. There is no women representation. So I don't know how they are going to do it, because 52%, 51% of a population in Nepal is women. So I don't know how they are going to do it. Even the immediate advisor of Prime Minister, our Prime Minister's immediate advisors are all men. So I don't know in COVID response how we are going to have a women perspective and how we are going to deal with the problems that is going to come up because of COVID in terms of, women body, reproductive system, and a lot of things related to it. Similarly, however, the 9% that we talked about in local government, as I said earlier, 91% are in deputy position, but the 9% who are in mayor position, who are working as the chiefs, the chairperson of their wards, what they are doing amazing jobs. For example, I'll give an example of Kantika Sejwal that I also recommended to Akhil. This is in Jumla. Jumla is a place where if you have to go, you have to walk for 9-10 days. So that is the scenario there. There's no even transportation facilities. There is nothing. It's just a, land with no, it's like desert. Jumla is like a desert of, Nepal, even though we don't have deserts. But in mountains, it's amongst the mountains, rocky hills, no transportation, nothing. But Kantika Sejwal has done such an amazing job. She was the second person who built the quarantine facility in Jumla. Imagine there she built the whole quarantine facility. The most noteworthy thing that she did was in Jumla, for students to engage, she ran radio programs so that students can sit in home. She went door to door and distributed Horlicks to women. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Horlicks, but it's big thing when you are pregnant here. So pregnant women in Jumla, they have to walk 2-3 hours to go to hospital. So she provided all these services and was really on foot during this process. So she was one of the exemplary figures working in ruralist part of Nepal, but exceptionally presented the COVID the track that was, because Jumla is very close to border, but still she managed it in such a way that there was no outbreak there. So that is something that I'm really proud of, and getting to know her and being a part. And she's also a part of political literacy for women. She took few classes with us. So she's something that we, she's not learned. She's not somebody who took degrees. She's not something, I think she studied only till grade 8, but her empathetic leadership and collaborative leadership in working with community and tribal groups there, that is something that was really noteworthy. I'll give you another example. So she is Renu Dahal. She is mayor of Bharatpur. She's also another great exemplary figure here in terms of COVID-19 response. She was the first person, she was not only first women, but first person to build quarantine facility in Bharatpur. So Bharatpur is a very lavish place, a metropolitan city and very good place. And she is very controversial figure because she is daughter of, one of the leaders of Communist Party. But having said that, and having all these controversies and everything that is circling around, but she was the first person to build quarantine facility. And Bharatpur, again, being very close to border, she was, we have a lot of border issues because we have two giant superpowers coming in, and I think you guys have seen in the news as well. But due to open border with India, we usually have very big problems when it comes to the virus and stuff like that. Even a lot of problems because the border is open. So women working in these open borders is something that I'm really proud of, and I'm so happy to share that those 9% are proving that 30% is required. That 9% is making us feel that women representation and women leadership matters. And if you will include us in COVID-19 response team, then even in borders we handled it, so we can handle in country. So this is the case study of Nepal in terms of COVID-19 response. I'm so sorry I could not bring you more example, because these two women are somebody who got the spotlight, but other 9% are in so rural area that there is not even media to outreach there. So I just had 2 examples, and but we hear about them, we see news pieces, but we don't have, I don't have exact data on how they are working. But these 2 women have been working very closely with political literacy for women. Thank you so much, Asian Pathfinders, for providing this opportunity to me. So I hope I broke the myth of 33% and I explained myself that why I am angry 100% of the time. So thank you so much, guys, and it was lovely having you guys. If you guys have any questions, then I think we'll do it question answer round. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prakriti. It was great. And I think what you gave us as a screenshot yesterday, why you're pissed. Now we exactly know why you are. And I think it's a great overall understanding for us to get a picture of Nepal. And now we're going to move to Dr. Sonam Chukki. And I think she's going to speak about Bhutan. One of the reasons what I love about having her here is everyone has a very different picture of Bhutan in our minds, because a beautiful, picturesque place, but we don't get to hear a lot about Bhutan. So I'm really glad she's agreed to be part of this. And it's over to you, Dr. Sonam.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Thank you so much. I just testing. Thank you very much, Pallavi, for your kind introduction, and to everybody at Asian Pathfinders. Thank you for having me. As you rightly said, this is a very small country, literally sandwiched between the 2 giants in Asia, our Indian colleagues in the south, and of course China in the north. So here are we. Our stories are very limited, but thank you for the opportunity. So I'll try and present beyond what you saw, the beautiful pictures, and very little that you heard about this country. Yeah. So just a very quick overview before I really talk about how our women leaders responded to COVID-19 pandemic in Bhutan. If you look, this country, this is a very little country, as I was saying. It's a population of a little over 700,000. We were never colonized, and democracy is something very young, just 12 years old, still about to get entered into teenage, adolescence age. We're still, we're still a child learning. So we were world's youngest democracy in 2008. So we had now 3 rounds of parliamentary elections. Akhil already presented the figure, the current figure. So when the first elections were held, we just had about, again, just double digit, but not more than what what Prakriti has in Nepal. Is very, very interesting, inspiring Nepal model. So we're less. But then in second election, the numbers went down to single digit, just very close to Maldives and Sri Lanka. And then, of course, now again, it's quite hopefully back, about 15% in the parliament. Now in here, how do you attribute to these? If you look at Bhutan, patriarchy in terms of exclusion of women, in terms of policy, explicit policy is not present. However, you have gender neutral policies, state policy, which are gender blind. And then there's no proactively state policies which support women. We also have deep-seated patriarchal construction in terms of culture, socio-cultural attitude. As there was a question earlier in the chat, one of the barrier is also the socio-cultural barrier, where women, women are not associated with leadership, specifically in public leadership position as compared to men. So as a result, then you also have less figure in the parliament or in public space, in civil service, in the corporate leadership positions, in the armed forces, in judiciary. The numbers are really, really small, dismal. And the other reason is we were the youngest democracy, so we were learning lessons from the consolidated democracies elsewhere, not just in South Asia, but beyond South Asia. So we also place a lot of importance on education and qualification. So the idea is that the best and the bright should be leaders. So women participated really late in development in terms of educational attainments. So not many women had the required minimum requirement of university degree, which is a requirement to participate in elections, specifically in parliamentary elections. This is why also the digital figure, is the single digit in the first parliamentary elections. More so, there were also a good supply of qualified women, but then again the balance, the balancing of your private sphere and your public sphere was a difficulty. As a result, not many women wanted to join in. So this is again the less figure. Now coming directly to the question of COVID-19 pandemic response. If you look at our country, this is one of the best time for Bhutan. In fact, majority of us, whether we are in public sphere or private sphere, in academia or in private, in private sector or in media, the narrative is that Bhutan is at our best during the pandemic time. We have, first of all, we have also a compassionate and caring king who's equally worried, like any other leaders around the world, specifically talking about caring leaders here, right? Leaders who are empathetic, who are inclusive, who are collaborative. So this is our king. So he reached out on foot, he toured all parts of the country, specifically the countries that, the parts of the country which are actually really vulnerable to COVID infection. So that's the background. Then you also have a set of politicians who are science informed. You have a prime minister who's a former medical doctor, who is a surgeon actually. You have a foreign minister who's a pediatrician, and you have a health minister who's a woman minister who's a public health specialist. In fact, I think he's an epidemiologist. So as a result, this is a completely science informed decision, making the highest decision in the cabinet, and then of course responding to the pandemic. So we were on the highest, high preventive measure. Bhutan was on the highest preventive, alert. We're talking about really proactive tracing, treatment, and of course the quarantine. So as a result, our cases all came imported. There's no community transmission till now. So the first case came in early March in the form of a tourist. But though the tourist had high, case of, his own high hypertension, he was also a person who's suffering from former, disease, non-communicable disease. But then he got cured. You see, I mean, he and his partner migrated out of Bhutan, but they cured. So. And also, then you also have the health minister, who's this woman minister, guided by the king, of course, and then the prime minister and the foreign minister. She was at the forefront, but she was 24/7 responding to media, reaching out to people through media on various channels. You had on the television, on radio, because if you look at Bhutan, large part of the population is in rural Bhutan. So she's reaching out to the ones who had no access to social media and print media and television through radio. And of course, on live press briefing to the audiences, various audiences, each time, whenever, so for starting right from health, hand hygiene to, social distancing measures, use a mask, psychological well-being, people in the quarantine, their own counselors if they needed some, so that they're not suffering from mental issues. And largely, most of the people, our population who got infected, so far we have only 79 cases. They all came imported from outside country, because most of our young people who went out of Bhutan, our country was really concerned, decision at the highest level, starting from the throne. So repatriation flights were sent to the Middle East, where a lot of Bhutanese are working. to India. So they all came in, and then as soon as they came in, the measures were really clear. So the first thing you had to go was you had to be in state-run quarantine facilities for 21 days. Even a week, much more increase 1 week, but WHO standards of 14 days, we went to 21 days because we were on the highest preventive measures. So the young people were also, the health minister reached out to young people so that they be alert that even if one single person can infect the community. So she's trying to counsel them, and she was also quite firm that there were if people broke the regulations, then they had to do 10 days of community service, and including pay for their own quarantine. Just now, all our quarantine facilities are taken care by state. The state provides free quarantine services, including good food and whatever support is required. She was also at the forefront, bordering the southern part of Bhutan, which borders very closely to Indian states of Assam and West Bengal. And as you know, our colleagues in India, the cases in West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, and Assam is rising, right? So also our health minister was on the highest alert. Just last week, she was on the tour to the southern borders so that all the high-risk groups, such as the cabbies, the truck drivers, the frontline workers are tested. So the next measure that she strategized out yesterday was you will have these people will be tested so that there's no community transmission. Also on all the border areas, you have the highest patrolling system in terms of the armed forces, the police, and you have huge number of the highest volunteers, peacekeepers under the King's Peacekeeper program. There are a lot of young teachers who trained themselves, who came forward with the schools closed since March. Only on 1st July, we opened our schools for the classes 10 and 12 who are at the high risk because who were sitting for common exams, public exams, and they are still closed. So teachers were free, but then they were not apathetic. Everybody became proactive, as I was saying. Bhutan is at at our best. You had the king, the prime minister, the leader of the opposition, the people in the private sector, the corporate world, the civil servants, and largely including the farmers, all united to fight COVID, so that there's no community transmission and Bhutan is still safe. Because as you know, we are a poor country and we have very limited resources. These are far too stretched. So this is why we were reprioritizing ourselves in terms of a clear, comprehensive, doable, realistic, and simple measures, but yet which are the measures which are really, really needed to be done at this hour, period in time in our history. And the government also, including the health minister, she talked about reprioritizing the budget. So we reprioritize our entire pool of resources to the health sector, science-based informed, so that we are using our limited resources for quarantine facilities, for medical purposes, for food distribution, for the to keep our vast borders safe, so that there's a high vigilance at the border. At the international airport here at Paro, if you're coming by flight, and by the way, we also locked ourselves in March itself, so we have no contact with outside world except for essential services coming to Bhutan through by road through India, because of the goodwill relationship with the Indo-Bhutan. So we had this understanding of really transporting all essential goods from India, the food supplies and medical supplies, and then of course through air, repatriating our people who are overseas and who want to return. So, but she's at the front line, and so day in, day out, she's at the front line. And also I was thinking in here, as Prakriti was talking about feminist movement, though in Bhutan, the word feminism is seen with negative glasses, not because people don't like it. I think there's a lack of education and understanding about the concept of feminism. Though we don't have had the violence against women in South Asia, I think compared to other countries, we're very fortunate that the violence at home is limited. But however, it doesn't mean that we do not have. In fact, the health minister was she was proactive about this issue also, even the number is low. So in May, for example, 76 women were abused and 4 children. So she was equally worried about that, and she reached out to these women, their spouses, their family members, and children to address this issue. So again, echoing the thoughts of our earlier colleagues from India and Nepal. So here is women leader presenting their better style of leadership instead of alpha style in terms of, I call it 4 C's, which is, I called it conscientious, caring, compassionate, cooperation, collaborative. At the same time, they're very humble. How their humility wins over and reaches out. So they're willing to listen to the science. They're willing to listen to the people from the street, from the farmers. This is also a deeply spiritual country. We're predominantly Buddhist. You also have our monasteries, our nunneries, reaching out in terms of food distribution, in terms of conducting prayers for the country and for the world peace. So everything came together really well. This is why for now I feel so blessed and really proud to be Bhutanese. We have just 0 death. So no death. We in the isolation facility, which is people who are kept in hospital, as of yesterday, we have only 9 persons. And then in the isolation facility, people have recovered, but still under observation for 2 weeks, 19 people. And so this is why very proactive, again, attributing to a health minister and a very proactive, caring, compassionate leadership and very humble leadership, followed by women politicians also. I've been talking to some of the women politicians. And Pallavi, please warn me for my time. I didn't
about a minute, sorry, Dr. Sona, I was just about
Okay, I'll wind up. So the last bit is, they are more on educational, informative, self-awareness, sensitive, empathetic, reaching out in every possible way. And of course, as Pallavi was also, as Prakriti was also saying, really empathetic leadership. And as a result, we're able to do things that we've done. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I've taken time. I'll be very happy to respond to questions if there are any questions. This is the gist of how our story from Bhutan. Thank you very much for your time and kind patience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonam. I think it's always, I think for me especially, understanding Bhutan, it's such a beautiful country. We all love it, but a lot of us don't have an understanding of how it works because of the nature of how the country functions. So it's really great. Thank you so much for joining us. I do see that Akhil has managed to answer 2 of the 3 questions, and you answered one of my questions. I know we do usually do a Q&A session, but because we are already short our time by 10 minutes more, so I would suggest we can do this is you can definitely reach out. I'll let the speakers drop their email addresses in the chat, and anyone has any specific questions, please do reach out to them directly via email. So that would be just, sorry about that. It's already short by like 11 minutes now. So as they type, I'll just say thank you everyone for coming again. And thank you so much for this wonderful discussion on topics which are very, today's topic was, I think, close to my heart. And I think a lot of our people who've joined us today on a Saturday morning is because we don't see a lot of women politicians' work being highlighted as it should be. And especially in a country like South Asia, as Dr. Sonam said, our societies are much more deeply still very patriarchal. And I think change comes in increments. And people like Dr. Sonam, Prakriti, Akhil, Sugandha, and everyone else that we know of and don't know of, they actually work together to bring about these incremental changes in society. So I think, Prakriti, hopefully in a few years, you're not going to be as angry as you are now. So on that note, thank you everyone for joining in, and do reach out to us, and please do join us next Saturday. We do have an interesting session coming up. The details will be up on social media early next week, so watch it out. Thank you. Bye guys, take care. Have a good weekend. Take care.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.